Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I hope you all are doing all right. Let's see, let's go for the second show for today. We're going to have a few more. I'm playing with the backgrounds. I hope it's not too distracting. I picked the moon for this one because I'm leaving the confines of the United States. I'm going international. Oh, by the way, the channel has been demonetized. That means all of the channel has been demonetized at this point. Patrons are the only ones that support the content. So if you feel like giving a donation, this is not a push. This is just heads up. There are people who sometimes give the super chat. You can do so at the bottom. There's a link in the description box. So what I want to talk about today are machinations that are going on from the standpoint of international politics. Someone asked in one of the Patreon videos to bring up the relations between the EU, the United States, the European Union, etc., etc. Well, European Union is EU. But essentially, world relations. How are world relations breaking down currently? Now, and I don't mean breaking down meaning breaking down in a sense falling apart, meaning a breakdown of world relations. There's something significant that's taking place right now, which kind of brings that point up. Trump putting tariffs on Turkey for supposedly a pastor named Andrew Brazo. Let me make sure I got the name right. The name sounds wrong. At least I wrote the name down wrong. Yes, so the pastor's name, Brunson. Andrew Brunson. I wrote it down hastily. And for this reason, the President of the United States has increased tariffs on a NATO ally, Turkey. That's pretty amazing. Now, there's a few amazing things in that. A, who the hell is Brunson, and why does Donald Trump care so much about this guy that he's increasing tariffs on a NATO ally? B, can you increase tariffs on somebody for this particular reason? I mean, this has nothing to do with foreign policy or nothing to do with items coming in and out. This is more of a foreign policy thing, but not a foreign policy from the standpoint of tariffs. Donald Trump is making this an economic issue. And C, are these really tariffs? Yes, I know they're tariffs in actuality, but I'm talking about from a political standpoint. Are these actually tariffs? Let's start with the last one. No, these are not tariffs. These are sanctions. You could call it a box of rocks. I'm talking about what it's actually doing. These are sanctions. Donald Trump doesn't want to call it a sanction because Turkey is a NATO ally and the goal is to keep Turkey close, and you don't necessarily want to lose face by taking it to this level. If you take it to a higher level, well, both parties need to save face, and it's become more difficult to save face for both parties once you kind of amp up the notion here. But for all intents and purposes, they're tariff sanctions. You're sanctioning the other economy. The question becomes, why? Are you punishing Turkey over this pastor that you seemingly cared nothing about up to this point? I would make the case that this has nothing to do with this pastor. This has everything to do with the United States realizing that there's a certain power loss, and it's trying to assert its authority through soft power because it can't do so with allies in a hard power way. What I mean is, no, you don't want to say you're sanctioning Turkey. Yes, you want to put hands on Turkey, meaning you want to punish Turkey. You do so through higher tariffs. The reason that you give to everybody else is, it's this pastor that we care so much about. Oh, we care so much about this pastor. We care so much about this pastor. But the reality of it is, there's another reason. What's the other reason? What possibly could the other reason be? Turkey has been flirting with buying products from Russia. A NATO ally has been talking. Now, understand what I mean by this. This is weird. Turkey is a NATO ally. All of these countries have allied together in unison saying, if Russia excuse me, if the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist, attacks any one of these countries, all of us are going to war. It's a pact that all of us make. So even the smaller Baltic countries will be defended in the same way that a country like Germany or one of these other countries will be defended. Great. The United States has been, NATO and the United States has been almost sacrosanct. Inseparable. You can't separate one from the other. You can make it an argument that it's an arm of U.S. foreign policy, or it is U.S. foreign policy. One of those nations, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the largest military in NATO, is talking about buying weapon systems from the country that all of them are supposed to be fighting against. Looks a little weird. By the same token, it also looks a little weird that Germany is part of NATO, and Germany has a pipeline with the same country who they are supposed to all of us jump into arms with if anything goes down. Also looks a little weird. This looks a little strange. NATO is flirting with this other thing, and the United States doesn't like it and is wrapping it on its knuckles for doing so. The economic sanctions, or let's be specific, tariffs, since they're calling them tariffs, even though they were increased 50% almost overnight on a whim, and done so purely to punish the Turkish economy, was done so to punish Turkey and Erdogan. Now, this flexing of muscles in this way will be disastrous, because there's another strand that's running through Turkish thought that most of the United States doesn't fully grasp. At least I think so, and I'm going to make the argument. At the same time this is taking place, Erdogan comes out, and Erdogan is trying to create this idea of a reinvigorated Ottoman Empire. That Turkey is going to be this world player and everything else. Now, but he's flirting with danger in this case. Putin is sitting there on the head of a Mustang with shades. Donald Trump comes downstairs, angry parent. How dare you go out with that man again? That man, he's dating this boy, this child. You're just a impressionable young lad. And Putin is standing out there so cool and muscular wrestling bears. How dare you, sir? Now the thing is, the problem with this is, Turkey is a country on its own right. It can do whatever it wants. It's a sovereign nation. Even if it is a part of NATO, it is a sovereign nation. It can do whatever it wants. The idea that you could say wrapping Turkey on its knuckles for doing something that Turkey finds to be in the best interest of Turkey is a little problematic. Also, the Soviet Union no longer exists. So there's that. In a video I did a long time ago, I made a mistake that may not necessarily be a mistake now. I made the argument that the world seemed to be breaking into multiple camps. That you had this Western camp, and you had this other camp with Iran, Syria, Russia, China, and I added Turkey to that. But that was somewhat of a mistake because Turkey is part of NATO. And now I'm thinking, was this somewhat prescient? Is this somewhat of a break that's taking place? The parent that chastises the child and the child just runs away as opposed to running back up to their room, meaning this child asserting its own independence. We can trade with whoever we want to trade with. There's something else. And it's something else that Julian Assange said. But first, let me nail this point down, because don't take my word for it. I was reading into this early on because it was CZ Dawson pointing me to a video that Julian Assange did talking about the Russians. In that video, Julian Assange goes into this thing talking about the Turkish Revolution and talking about a strain of thought that is taking hold in Turkey in the media about the United States' role in the last coup that took place in Turkey. It's fucking fascinating. It lends itself exactly to what I'm saying here from the standpoint of the thought that may be in the country itself that we may be missing, or that may lead to a fracturing or a break of this nation, part of the NATO Union, or at the very least, this idea of a bind and alliance between the United States and Turkey. Let's take a look at this first, and I'll flip over to that afterwards. This is The Independent. U.S., Turkey, Trump, Erdogan trade war. And so it came to pass that Trump's wrath was visited upon the Muslim president who locked up a man who was only doing God's work in the comfortable coastal city of Izmir. Doubles U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum helped to crash the Turkish lira, which has lost 45% of its value this year, although Erdogan might also be blamed for his refusal to raise interest rates against inflation. But let's be sane, is this all because of a Presbyterian pastor? Is it all because of a Presbyterian pastor? Is Trump really getting up in arms over a Presbyterian pastor? Is that what it is? Religious freedom. He's friendlier with Saudi Arabia than pretty much any president we've ever come across. That's a theocratic government that uses U.S. weapons to essentially suppress his own community. Not to mention push out Wahhabism and all this other stuff throughout the region. Trump doesn't care about this pastor. This is a pretext that he's given the media in order to attack Turkey. That's what's taking place. This is what I'm trying to tell you. This is a political framing around something that has a reality to it. That is, the United States is pissed off that Turkey has associated itself further with Russia. U.S. soft power in the world is degrading. And what you're seeing here in regards to these sanctions and everything else is just trying to assert authority, when instead what it's getting is people being more independent. For here's a real list of Erdogan's crimes. He's buying the Russians' S-400 missile systems from Turkey. He refuses to accept U.S. support for Americans' Kurdish YPG allies. He allowed the Islamist fighters to pour over Turkey's border into Syria along with a lot of weapons, mortars, and missiles, to which Washington had no objections at the time, since the United States was trying to knock Erdogan's former friend Bashar al-Assad off his perch. Then, after shooting down a Russian aircraft along Syria's border in November 2015, for which he was immediately boycotted by Moscow, Erdogan cuddled up to Putin. It was thus Russia's and the Iranians, right here, who first warned Erdogan of impending Gulen coup against him in July 2016. They had been listening to the Turkish military's internal radio traffic and tipped him off to the Sultan of Istanbul. My argument in this earlier was, if we're not careful, if the United States is not careful, you're going to find that those countries break off into certain blocks, ally blocks. I akin this to the way that alliances were similar in World War I. Well, all of these countries broke off into their alliances, and then when one thing sparked off, these alliances kind of kicked in. That was my concern back then. That's to some degree my concern now. Turkey, let me say it this way. Erdogan was tipped off that there was a coup against him by Iran and Syria. Why didn't Washington know? Now, they found out on the radio and they hit him up. But there's, you could call it a rumor. And you could say this rumor was even reported, I'm not to talk about it, that Washington knew about it, that this was some level of a CIA coup in order to take him out of office. They believe that this was coordinated from the United States and that the guy that did it, I think, is living in Pennsylvania. Now, that's not necessarily something that's reported here. I've heard somebody else say that, but I didn't necessarily realize that that gained any level of media traction in Turkey, and apparently it did. So put those two things together. Put Erdogan right here. The Iranians who first warned Erdogan about the impending Gulen coup. So right off the bat, Russians and Iranians say, hey, you're about to lose your head. You know what happened to Gaddafi? You're about to lose your head. And then the rumor comes out. It was the CIA, just like the CIA playing these other coups. It was also the CIA and some elements of your government also plotting this coup. You can understand that that can create somewhat of a wedge. Erdogan now taking this step of saying, all right, I'm going to do these other steps that is against necessarily what Washington wants. At least Washington was for it. Now the Washington's against it. It's asserting a certain amount of independence. What Trump is doing here, saying we need to increase tariffs willy-nilly, bam, we just need to increase tariffs. This is, for all intents and purposes, sanctions. But this will not have the effect that he wants. Meaning, this is not going to have the effect where Erdogan is going to just bow his head and say, okay, and come back in the line and not buy those weapons. If anything, you're incentivizing him to do exactly the same thing. There's no way a guy who considers himself a strongman is going to walk back with the United States trying to, you can say, use him as a whipping boy to pull him back in the line. You're not going to get it. I'd be shocked as shit if that takes place. Not because, and this has nothing to do with who's right, wrong, anywhere in between. This is more just the notification video. It's just political leaders, for all intents and purposes, can't look weak. There's something to be said for political leaders needing to save face. If you put them in a position where they can't save face by any other means, then they're going to go through this kind of hellish position. I say the same thing is taking place here. Whether they're using this thing of a pastor as somewhat of a fig leaf, a reason to essentially impose what they're calling tariffs on another government. This is such a fig leaf. You would think the media would be more bright in saying, wait a minute, are you really doing all this because of a pastor, or are you doing this because these guys are essentially moving away from you? Here's the thing. The moment that you expose that this is something to do with American foreign power waning, then you've exposed that American foreign power has started to wane. This is nothing to do with a pastor. This is everything to do with Turkey moving closer to Russia from standpoint of their investments. Listen to Assange for a moment. Assange brings this up in the weirdest of ways in this video. Right here.
We don't publish allegations. We know what this...
Oh, and by the way, what I mean is, what you're about to see is, Assange is bringing up this idea of there's a strain that has taken hold in the Turkish media that the United States has something to do with the coup that almost failed. Meaning that the CIA was in some part responsible or has something to do with it. Now, whether that's true or not is besides the point. The very fact that a strain of this had been reported and this idea is to some degree believed is going to create a fracture within the political system. How on earth can you keep ties in if you believe that those same ties were that they tried to remove you from power? Like, this is what you're working with. Again, whether that's true or not is less important than whether or not, or the hold that that's taken in the minds of the people who are in Turkey. I'm gonna let Assange do this.
Sources. The source is the DNC. The source is W. Wasserman Schultz. The source is the head of finance. The source is the communications director, Luis Miranda. So we know who the source is. The question is, who is the intermediary? We know who the publisher is, it's WikiLeaks. So for our publications, it's a lesser issue. It is a big issue in the case of other media organizations who are simply making claims and not publishing original documents. I'll give you an example, a very, very interesting example. I've done some research on the Turkish coup. Okay. Now, it's not spoken about in the West, but within Turkey, the Turkish newspapers are publishing elements of a theory that the United States was directly involved in the coup. The US intelligence backed Fethullah Gulen, who's based in Pennsylvania, as the head of the Gulen cult that has been implicated in the coup. In fact, according to the Turkish government, is the leading actor in the coup.
He's wanted by President Erdogan.
Yes, and they've put out extradition requests and so on. But one of the key independent points of evidence, not coming from an interrogation in Turkey where people may have been placed under duress, is that in the middle of the coup, NBC published that Erdogan was on his way to Germany to seek asylum.
That's fucking fascinating. That's fascinating on 2 points. Well, 3 points. He's involved. He's paying attention to Turkish media. That's amazing. But let's say B, Erdogan is told that people are trying to come and get him by Iranian and Syrian forces. That's the first point. He's not told by Washington, apparently. Or maybe he is, but he was first told by Iranians and Syrians. They're also told, or there's a strain of reporting that said the CIA or the United States, Washington, had something to do with the coup, that they were somehow materially involved in the coup. Then you get NBC News reporting that Erdogan is fleeing the country. Now, the reason this is big news is because if Erdogan is fleeing the country, it means the people who are involved in the coup have effectually won, and that there's no point in continuing fighting since your guy has ran. Erdogan hadn't left. Where the hell did NBC News get that tip from? I'm making the point here that... Wait a minute. Oh, Jesus Christ, I lost my train of thought. I'm making the point here that this seems to be a fracture. If that's true, which I don't think he's lying, I've heard this before from someone other than Julian Assange, that there was this idea that, and again, not just Julian Assange, at the upper levels of Turkey, seeing as Turkey has continued to make extradition requests for the gentleman that's in Pennsylvania. Turkey believes that the person responsible for the coup is either Washington and is sitting in Pennsylvania. Turkey believes that they were given a heads up about the coup by Iran and Syria. And you could say Turkey is buying weapons from Russia. My point here, not to mention the troops pouring into Syria, the interest that they have in Syria that may just run necessarily contrary to what Washington wants. There seems to be a break in the alliance, let's say the NATO alliance. And one of the larger members seems to be leaning closer to Russia. The browbeating, the rapping on the knuckles that Donald Trump is doing may not have the intended effect that Donald Trump wants, which is to bring them back in line. What it may have is that they stand up and leave. And stand up and leave. And I strongly suspect that that may be what you end up with. Meaning, yeah, they're going to buy those weapons from Russia. And yeah, at some point, they may leave NATO. But this may be a dance that Turkey does in between the two powers. We'll see. But this is not about a goddamn pastor. That's the point of this video. Not necessarily give a clear distinction of what's taking place, but very clearly to say what is not taking place. These are not tariffs. These are sanctions. It's not about a pastor. It goes deeper than that. And the idea of NATO seems to be fracturing at the edges with Donald Trump involved, trying to, you can call it either pacify or discipline one of the other countries that's involved in this process. All right. That's what I want to say. I think I got it out. Let's see. Who's here? Let's not forget the way we've been playing the Kurds for decades. Yes, Garden Gnome. Manny, I had written love y'all, go vegan. That was not an assertion, you silly goose, okay? Cenk might have an agenda with regards to Turkey. No, now that I don't know, Trudy. That I have no idea. Order of Chaos. Spraying pesticides makes pesticides resistant bugs. That's true. Trump calling the news fake news causes people to run to the defense of news. People used to grasp third-grade reverse psychology. Well, I mean, if you call everything fake news, that's just his political ploy of you can call it diffusing what he doesn't like as news. And the moment that you find a few items where they fuck up on the news, you can point to those things and continue to bring those things up as being fake news. Tariffs are illegal. Sanctions are legal. Faction 4. Tariffs are not illegal. We used to use tariffs to run this country. Unless they've been made illegal at some point along the way. But If I am not mistaken, we still have tariffs. And sanctions, look, we're hitting them on the knuckles, but we're using tariffs to do it. With the sanctions, it'll be more honest, but we're using tariffs to do it. That's my point. Jamarl, please do more videos on science, new energy technologies, and space-time metric propulsion. If you send me good videos, if you send me a good article on it, I'll do it. I'm always up for it. Thank Trump for contributing to the decline of NATO war machine. Bernard Madoff. You know, it's funny. Well, that's just it. I don't think he's contributing to the decline, believe it or not. Turkey may leave, or Turkey may limp along as a member of NATO. It's going to be him telling for Europe to increase the amount of money, their expenditures. The overwhelming majority of the money that those expenditures go towards is for United States weapons companies. Trump telling them to increase their expenditures is not destroying NATO. You can make an argument that that's making NATO even more, I guess, intransigent. By the same token, if Turkey leaves, maybe, it's hard to tell. I find this stuff, I have no predictions on this, outside of the prediction that it is fraying the bonds of NATO. So in that part, I agree with you. Well, okay, I'm saying two things at once. I don't know what happens to NATO. That's what I'm trying to say. By the same token, it does seem like Turkey is pulling away. And trying to discipline Turkey in this, does the United States have the grounds to do such a thing? Meaning, are they the parent in this regard? And what is most likely a country that understands that it's a country, that affirms its independence as a country? How is that country going to deal with being disciplined? Let's say it that way. Are they going to fall back in line, or are they going to do their own thing? I suspect they will be more inclined to do their own thing. There's been a chorus of countries that have been calling for the dollar to be dumped as a reserve currency. A lot of that has to do with the United States as being seen as an unfair, let's say, arbiter of the reserve currency. It's untrusted. It's using its status as a reserve currency to punish other countries. That's my point. So this may have, let's just say this may have blowback. That's all. Because the United States has been doing sanctions across the world and everything else. The expectation is that the rest of the world is just going to stand there and take it. I don't necessarily think that's true. Turkey used to be the #1 arms buyer. Not anymore, man. We're back with Saudi Arabia now, if I'm not mistaken. People are reacting to your agenda. Stop projecting. Oh, Louis, Guido. Okay, you guys are fighting. Saudi Arabia is our best arms buyer. Yeah, now Saudi. If NATO goes, what would be it for the EU? The EU is probably going to beef up on its military complement if the NATO goes. That money is just going to go into their own budgets, their military budgets. Jamal, check out Tom DeLonge. He talks about space-time metric propulsion. I feel you. Tom DeLonge is a rock star, and Tom DeLonge has a, let's just say there's some interviews that Tom DeLonge did not go well. I just say it that way. I'm skeptical of what's behind Tom DeLonge. I don't think what Tom DeLonge is saying is wrong, meaning I don't think the very specifics of the United States government knows something, the United States government is not telling what it knows, the United States government should open the vaults, that type of stuff. When he gets into aliens eating babies, he completely loses me. And I know he didn't say specifically aliens are eating babies, but he's into the bad alien theory. The people who are behind him are the people who I'm terrified of. I think there's some sharks behind Tom DeLonge. I think there's some serious sharks behind Tom DeLonge. So, let me say it this way. Do you believe that the military industry has been love and light? Yes or no? That the guy that makes the bomb is making the bomb because he wants the best world, or the guy making the bomb because he wants to sell the bomb? You have a rock star who's interested in UFO stuff. and somebody who may be a little bit more in the know than the rock star says, hey, I'll whisper some secrets in your ear, and he's caught. There's nothing wrong in the heart of the rock star. He's not doing anything wrong. He wants to know just like all these other people want to know. And he believes that there's somebody else that may a little bit more than him. That somebody else has some secret, has some information that is being kept, is not being told to the public. That's probably true. I don't necessarily doubt that. The catch becomes, what is that information? Now, if somebody whispers in your ear, I have no way to verify the information that's whispered in your ear. And I'm also stuck with this idea of, who is the person whispering in your ear? What is that person backing? What has that person been backing up to this point? If you have a military industry in the United States, and the military industry that builds bombs and jets and planes says, we want to build a new type of bomb, a new type of jet, a new type of plane. That bomb and jet and plane will be using a new energy source. And that energy source will be able to bend space and everything else. Do I jump for joy over that? No, because that's the same military industry that's there now that's building bombs and jets and planes, is killing and maiming and murdering people abroad across the world. My angst here over this is that we haven't matured. I don't want to say spiritually, because when people say spiritually, it comes across as new agey. But rationally, to use those technologies. Now, assuming for the moment that there is no God, and assuming for the moment in the space that there is no God, any argument that I make can't necessarily include God. So I leave God off the table. That's why I don't use the spiritual stuff. But I do make the argument that if we want to exist on this planet, and we want this planet to have a certain habitable space, going with this capitalistic argument, where a 1% dominates, doesn't get you there. And if I am looking for some level of relationship between human beings that's fair and earnest, where I don't have any chains on you and you don't have any chains on me, and we're free human beings, it's not a capitalistic system. Now, that doesn't mean I'm something else, meaning that doesn't mean I'm some other label, but it does mean I'm not necessarily on board with the capitalistic system. I do think, however, being that we're in this model, that human nature is water in a glass. And that if you pour human nature in this particular glass, I think this world that we have is the world that you get. You're dropping this level of technology into a world that's this irrational. Irrational from the standpoint of the masses. We work and we toil not to just make sure people have the things that they need, but to make sure a 1% gets richer. That's why we work and toil. I think that's insane. Do we really want to drop resources, these high technologies, into an environment like this? And in this environment where what people say is completely untrusted, liars, most of them, paid shills, a lot of them, fucking aliens. Like, this is why I don't necessarily jump for joy with this, even though there's a part of me that has the sign screaming, Space Brother. The smiling sharks that are behind Tom DeLonge as this information sheepishly comes out into the public misses the point that this has been something that the United States has been talking about for years. And they act as if this has only been going on for a very short period of time, and that the little bit of money is the only money that they spend for it, meaning they're opening this on a lie. The entire premise is fraught with lies. So even when they're releasing the information to the public, the information is being released around a cornucopia of lies. So yeah, forgive me. I'm skeptical of the way that these guys are releasing this information. Don't get me wrong. I like the confirmation. So I like the idea that these guys are coming out saying this is a real issue. So I don't want to seem overly critical here, even though it sounds like I'm being overly critical here. Stephen Greer comes out and says the bad alien theory is a myth. I know this is devolved into goddamn aliens. Fuck it. Stephen Greer has said that the alien theory is a myth. That this is what I mean when I said this gets fucking bonkers. This is why I I believe little or nothing in this area. Like, it's, I'm stuck in this thing of, you can't believe any of it. By the same token, I'm open to hearing it. And let's, what do you have for evidence? Or what do you have to put on the table? Or what do you have that could be some degree confirmed? But I'm open for logical arguments. And I love hearing this stuff because I think it's interesting to hear. And there's some that are more believable than others. One of the good things Greer did was to have all these people videotaped, giving testimony about this stuff that goes for hours. It's fascinating. Greer himself usually talks about himself. But in some of these cases, when you ever get the chance to hear Greer, where Greer's talking about something other than himself, one of the things that he mentioned was, and I'm telling this, not because this is true, but only because I want to pivot it against Tom DeLonge and make a point. Greer says there's no such thing as bad aliens, that bad aliens don't exist in the universe, that that's purely a conception of humanity being a violent species. Okay. And in addition to there's no such thing as bad aliens, that human beings have advanced so far in technology that they create these human alien-like things, and these are the things that creep along in people's bedroom at nights and scares the shit out of them and abducts them and everything else. That there are no bad aliens, they're human-created aliens that kind of like these creatures. And like, this shit gets fucking weird. And like, but you can't say that Greer hadn't had contact with government types. He has. Greer has his sources. Like, there are people who Greer talked to. I don't doubt everything that Greer says. Greer may have had these contacts and everything else, but Greer walked away from those contacts thinking there are no bad aliens. Tom DeLonge walked away from these contacts thinking they're aliens eating babies. Which one is right? Which government source is right? The War of the Spooks. Like, this is kind of what I mean. I think to some degree, whatever these people believe is the thing that these people were left with. So I don't know whether what Tom DeLonge is saying has any more efficacy than what somebody else would be saying. I don't know. It's just what they're saying. I hope that makes sense. It's my skepticism here is because I look at politics and I see people lie flagrantly and cast themselves as one thing while being something completely different from what they are. But they do so because they're trying to catch certain political wins and everything else. This is not just a political thing. This is a business thing also. I don't want interaction with the stars to be under some kind of capitalistic thing. Who buys the moon? They really want that? Purchasing of planets because some trillionaire, some plutocrat becomes the first trillionaire, owning the entirety of a moon and the people who live on a colony. I don't want space, or I don't want capitalism in space. So this idea of Tom DeLonge creating some kind of capitalistic enterprise in order to build a ship and all this other stuff, it bugs me. It rubs me the wrong way. Even though I like the fact that the information is coming out into the mainstream, I am bothered by what that means from the standpoint of a military establishment that I know back Tom DeLonge in getting this information out. I hope that makes sense. The terror here is not, oh yeah, there's something flying in our skies. The terrifying thing is, in order to do something about the thing that's flying in our skies, we need to build more technology and weapons and some of these all, newfangled equipment. That's the part that freaks me out. So I understand I understand people being excited about Tom DeLonge. My excitement has a question mark associated with it. Let's just say it that way. Let's just say it that way. Only white people are UFOs. What the fuck? Yeah, I don't know what that one is. We read about UFOs from Mayans. Yeah, Mayans, Aztecs, Egyptians, Native Americans. Yeah, I have some awesome Native American contact books. They're fucking fascinating. And this is not like, Native Americans pre-Columbian. This is, people living in Arizona that, they had a grandpa and they used to be out with the grandpa, stuff like that. It's phenomenal. We need another teacher like Feynman. Khan Academy is close. The science movement into space could be done by Star Trek fans using tactics like boycotting. We could take over and force it to be Star Trek humanity overselling the moon. No, the economic system needs to be changed. Full stop. Full stop. Like, you're fishing water. Like, it's time to acknowledge the water. It's this idea that reality is configured this way, just as the nature that reality is configured this way, is nonsense. Like, imagine a society where you wake up and you have no bills. 0 bills. Imagine it for the moment. This is not a 420. But this idea that you wake up and you're just a person. And you're just a person doing X or doing Y, but it's not a person because you have bills and people putting restraints around you. These invisible restraints. No, that's just a different concept of the way you go about organizing society. I understand what somebody who's in the top 1% would say the capitalism is fucking awesome and we need to maintain capitalism. I would understand why a king and a queen would say we need to maintain the royal family and everything else. That we're royalty, God bestowed this bond. I get it. From their perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. But for the 99% of the people who are going to be within similar classes, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Can we organize a society of free men? That's where it is. And that doesn't mean this kind of, libertarian, and I mean American libertarianism, where everybody's out for everybody else, that nonsense. There needs to be some honest acknowledgement that if you're in a society, meaning if there's more than one of you, then you're in a society. Then you have to deal with the other people. There has to be some balancing. But by the same token, if you're in a society and there's more than one of you, all of those other people are hands. All of those other people are resources that you can use to build a fucking awesome world. Money is not fully necessary in this. But even going along the ideas of maintaining some kind of capitalistic structure, it is odd to me that the 99% allows all of the resources to go to the 1% in the way that the resources do. It is utterly bizarre to me. Utterly bizarre. My point is, you start there. Anything else is an outgrowth of your economic system. Meaning, how do you feed yourself? How do the people in your society get food from their ground into their mouths? Regardless of where you are, that's going to be an issue. Work, just as a basis of the human experiment of sorts, or the human environment, it's just there. It needs to be dealt with. The question is, how do you deal with the work? My argument here is you've reached a point where you have machines that for all intents and purposes can do the labor. If nothing else, if you are the 99%, get rid of poverty. Get rid of poverty. Get rid of poverty. Machines can and should do the labor. So, look, I'm going to end it here. The 1% looks out for the 1%. Full stop. The 1% looks out for the 1%. The arguments that they make, the people who they put in office, the people who they put money behind, it is purely and only looking out for their interests. They don't care about your interests. They care about their own interests. This is an issue of class. This is not an issue of race, identity, or anything else. This is an issue of class. You've had all of these different movements, whether it was women's rights, whether it was black, identity rights. This is the one that we're at. Meaning there's, you can call it a hegemonic point of view that is shifted on the things of race and class and sex, or race and sex. But the one on class hasn't shifted, but that's the one that also needs to shift. There needs to be a breakdown from this thing. Let's say a real understanding of this idea of class. It needs to be on the forefront of what people talk about and how people engage. If all of your resources are being dumped into a tiny, tiny few, do you realize that 95% of the wealth went to the top 1% under Obama? And in 2017 under Trump, the top 1% got a 17% bump on top of that. Like I'm trying to, it's hard to get across the amount of money that goes to the top, the amount of resources that gets expropriated for the lower classes to the top. I understand why the top 1% would allow that. I don't understand why the 99% allow such a thing to take place. So, I that's somewhat of a detour, but that's, you know, it's very true. Let's see, somebody gave a donation, and I'm probably going to end it on that. And for whatever reason, my donation thing is below my other image. Great. All right, so give me 1 second, guys. They have so many questions. Usually I keep this open. We had a power outage today. Not to mention that people were doing work outside, so starting videos was a no-go. And Virgo supercluster treaties. The Virgo supercluster treaties is a terrible treaty. We spend trillions of space bucks and Space Force troops protecting Andromeda. We will rework the Milky Way protections into the Milky Way free trade agreements. Make Milky Way green again. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Make the Milky Way green again. That's exactly what we need to do. Yeah, that's funny. All right. MacArthur, Louisiana, Jamal, I apologize for being a jackass. I didn't realize you were being a jackass. Let's see. Where were you being a jackass? We need to bring that out to light, because I need to know. And the rest of the world that watches this show needs to know. Damn it, I don't know where it is. Yeah, dude, you need to be more jackass, more in the open if you're going to be a jackass. Space Explorer sounds better, jerk. Yeah, I like Space Explorers. Manny, I'm late. No, that's not it. Damn it, I don't know where it is. All right, Louisiana. Well, keep that as a lesson. Whatever you did and whatever I said. Whatever you did and whatever I said, take that, buddy. Earth soon to be turned into a Vogan Poetry Slam Cafe. Oh, you're talking about Rick and Morty. You're talking about Rick and Morty, where they're fighting for Earth using a thing. If we quit NATO, we would invade Europe easily. I don't think that's true. Why would we need to invade Europe when we have military all over Europe? Because military bases all over Europe. I think what happens is Europe doesn't necessarily need to pay a bunch of money into their military because the United States already does it for them. Meaning the protection of Europe is, for all intents and purposes, just whatever the United States' interest is. The catch right now, though, is Europe is becoming somewhat of a vassal state. And they're finding out with this Iran deal, when the United States pull out this deal, what does it mean for Europe? Europe wants to stay into the deal. Europe has no muscle at all to do anything about it. So even though you have this European Union group, the weakness of the European Union group is shown based on what the United States does versus what the Europe can do in relation to what the United States does, which amounts to not much at all. So yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to end this space farce. No, they're saying it's going to be a fifth wing of the military or something. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone. This one went way off the rails. I'm not an American citizen, bro. I'm from Turkey. I love that. It's like, I'm a communist, bro. It's just that it's more like to see focus on free energy. Oh, I see. Oh, dude, you didn't speak out of turn on that at all. No. MacArthur, no, there's no problem. No, dude, let me be very clear. There's no problem with the free energy stuff, with UFO stuff. The thing is, if somebody says, I can create a device that functions off of free energy, I say, great. We've only been doing science for, 100 years or so? I don't have this belief that everything the scientists say is the word of God. But you got to show it. That's the only problem with this. And oftentimes, many people would say it without necessarily having anything to show. That's all. And Greer oftentimes does these things about saying that he can see it, he had it near him, he had what was holding his hand, but never could he, expose it. So you're always stuck in this situation of somebody says they have something, even though they can never actually show you the thing that they've either seen or been in a room with or been able to contact. But there's no issue with saying anything about it or even bringing it to my attention. I mean, hell, NASA had a device that they said didn't work and had to backtrack on the thing of saying it didn't work, because even though they couldn't figure out necessarily how it worked and did what it did, it worked. I can't think of the name of it. It was a propulsion system that they said did not work, and then they had to backtrack saying it did. I would love to interview Richard Dolan. I'd love to interview Richard Dolan. And look back at my old interviews. I've interviewed several UFO researchers. Grant Cameron being probably one of my favorites. So yeah. Anna Max will stroke my ears, we'll all be a Ferengi. I know, right? I know. That should be a t-shirt. Stroke my ears and we'll all be a Ferengi. I love that. I love that. Oh God, I love that. Stroke my ears, we'll all be a Ferengi. I'm taking that. Stroke my ears. It sounds so dirty, but it sounds dirty in a geekish comic book way. Stroke my ears. I have Discord. It's a form for gamers. So I see. Stroke my ears. We'll all be a Ferengi. God, I love that. All right, I'm going to end it on that because that's just epic. We'll all be Ferengis. Perfect. And this thing has a light. Alright, I'm going to end this. If you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support through Patreon. I gotta be honest, I don't know if I like this black screen or this green screen, but we'll see. I'm going to do a few more. I know change is different, so it's going to take a little bit. Stroke my ears and call me the Negus. Oh, that's even more Cavi. Yeah, that's even more KG. I like that, Bob. I like that. I like that. Call me the Negus. My wife has made this point that t-shirts where you don't fully get it right away are better. Like me, like saying capitalism sucks is not the same thing as, let's say, doing a t-shirt of like showing why it sucks. If that makes sense. Like if it's too diffuse, nobody's gonna get it. But it has to be diffuse enough where some people get it. That makes this shirt awesome. I hope that makes sense. So doing the t-shirt, I did this t-shirt adorable, like adorability guaranteed or adorable guaranteed, something like that. And I did that because one of the worst aspects of capitalism is advertising. Like at a certain point, the advertising is not to get across what the product does. It's to make this product in the sense of mythic. And oftentimes you have things on the market that fundamentally do the exact same thing. And these people are spending all this money in advertising to get you to buy something that's the same thing as this our product sitting right across the aisle from it. It becomes the point of which not to create something that people need, but something instead that people would buy. And believe it or not, there's a divergence in those things, even though there's a Venn diagram where those things over one another. I thought that was more funny. I thought it was more funny as opposed to capitalism sucks. But I love that. And I love that. Stroke my ears and call me the Negus. Oh, I love that. I love that. The Negus could always buy people to stroke his ears, but I'm pretty sure it's a little bit better to have somebody that does it because they want to do it. At least I would think so. Right, like shirt that says, I am smart. Anyway, man, thanks for reading, comment, and answering with your opinion. What did I say? Yeah, you said something. I answered. I tend to just be doing this kind of stream of consciousness thing when I'm looking at it. What did I say? What did I say? I gotta be honest, I'm curious. If we quit NATO, we would invade. Oh, I see. No, I don't think we'd invade Europe. At least I don't think so. My entire life has been in NATO. So outside of NATO, from the standpoint of an American standpoint, who the hell knows? Like, that's somewhat of a crapshoot. But I have a hard time believing that U.S. foreign policy would immediately invade NATO. I'm more concerned with us doing something that starts a larger conflict or a larger war with Russia and what I consider to be a secondary bloc that that's been created in opposition to Western power bloc, meaning the United States, France, Germany, the UK, and then you have this secondary power bloc, Iran, Turkey, Russia, Syria, North Korea. Like, you look at this thing and you say, what are the blocks that we've completely antagonized, that we've separated as if it was something separate and distinct from us? Turkey hasn't necessarily fallen with that particular distinction. By the same token, we're hitting Turkey with tariffs, which, again, I say for all intents and purposes are sanctions, by a different name, wrapping them on the knuckles, financially screwing them over royally. So, Trudy, it's not me. Progressive Voice getting 120% of donations on this channel. Oh, God. If that's true, he's not getting anything because this channel is not getting paid at this point. So, yeah, I just like it. I just like doing it. Also, I do feel like my patrons pay me to do this. So I get out here and do this. I gotta be honest, Progressive Voice thing trips me out like nobody's business. I laugh my ass off at that. I want sanctions on Russia. I don't want sanctions on Russia. Just saying I don't. That message, she goes into the Russia thing. In fact, I think I'm gonna do that in the next video. There's Julian Assange talks about the Russia stuff and talks about the Guccifer and the hacking. Susie Dawson sent me the video. I'm gonna do that one. Edward Davis, I joined Patreon yesterday because I'd rather support this than pay a cable bill. Oh, thank you, Edward. You have no idea how much it helps. They gutted this channel completely. Hopefully in August 31st on my birthday, on the day after that, they will release the hold on the videos. Release the hold on the on demonetizing the channel. We'll see. I hope so. Because it's somewhat of a, yeah. To say it's rough is an understatement. Right. Screw NATO, surely. I gotta be honest, Donald Trump, if somebody bought in Donald Trump in order to create a wrecking ball against the world order, maybe. By the same token, he hasn't gotten rid of NATO, and he's browbeating certain countries. You can make an argument that he's browbeating Turkey because he wants Turkey to stay in NATO and not to get the Russian weapons. We're living in interesting times. Like, we're living in where you may see a fall of a particular world order and a changeover into something else. And it's hard to know what that looks like. So, I'll end it here. Wait, are we getting Jamarl? Chris Sean. Oh, that's funny. No, I'm ending this. Alright, guys. You'll have a good one. I will see you probably in like 15 minutes or so. I have another video. I just need to queue it up. Thanks, guys.